After I got in getting my teaching certificate, I did my student teaching at Main Street in a class, and Larry Johnson and Pearl Johnson were in the class that I did my student teaching in. And I interviewed in summer of '69, and probably because I had done my student teaching at Main Street, I was placed at Main Street 5th grade, which is what I did my student teaching in. I didn't know it then, but after being at Main Street for a number of years, I realized what a community Main Street had. The families stayed. They did not move around. They knew each other. Very close-knit, supportive community. And I meet anybody from Main Street, and we all go, "Oh, Main Street." I mean, it was an incredible place to be. And of course, that was my very first year of teaching. Really nervous about what I was going to do and how to do it. In come these kids. I'm 5 feet tall. I think I was 26 years old, and scared to death, really. And I remember Earvin's name is spelled Earvin, so of course I'm taking the class roll, and I called him Earvin, which got numerous laughs. But he never teased me about it. As I have said to people, if I had known, if I had had any idea, I would have taken lots better notes about what that year was going to be like. The things I remember about Earvin was how much of a leader he was. When we went to recess, he was in charge. And he would kind of decide what we were going to play. Kickball was very popular. And he always made sure, if he was the captain, and normally he was, that players that he knew the other captain would not choose would end up on his team. He always kind of, in a very quiet way, put his arm around the kids who were struggling athletically. I mean, he was always encouraging people, helping them to do things. And it was just the way the other kids treated him, too. I mean, they wanted to be his friend. I'm just glad he liked me, because I think he corralled a couple of the kids who might have made my life very difficult. In those days, there was a presidential award that you could work for if you were, I think it was for 5th and 6th graders. And it was quite strenuous to do, and Earvin and I think 1 or 2 other kids were the only kids in the class who earned that award. The real connection, I guess, came when a group of 5th grade boys came to me and said, "Mrs. Dart, the 6th graders have a team. Mr. Keyes, who was the principal at the time, told us that we could have a basketball team, but we needed an adult to supervise us. Would you be that adult?" And of course, knowing nothing about basketball and trying to learn how to be a good teacher, I said no. Well, I think the kids assumed I would say no, because the no was barely quiet when they said, "What about your husband?" And I stopped and thought, Jim loves sports. He was captain of the varsity football team and played basketball and baseball and ran track. And I said, I'll ask him. And Jim said, sure, I'll do it. Sounds like fun. And so one day a week, Jim would come over after school. I think school got out at 3:30. He couldn't always be there right at 3:30, so Earvin was in charge of running the drills, and they ran drills. Jim made arrangements with a couple of the other schools to play informal games, and then spent the next 2 years telling everyone he knew, there's this kid I know at Main Street School who is going to be a top-notch Big Ten basketball player. Well, Earvin was, as I remember, my height, maybe a little bit taller, 5 feet in 5th grade, and there was no indication that he was going to end up being 6'9". So we didn't have children, and Jim had a group of kids to haul all over to basketball games. And in Lansing, they would, I know they went down to one of the state finals in Ann Arbor when Chrysler still held some of the state games. In fact, he had Earvin and a bunch of kids at the game where there was a riot at the end. He was a little scared something was going to happen to these kids. But I wish Jim were here to talk to you, because he saw a different, he's a guy, so he saw a different side of Earvin than I did. This wasn't when Earvin was in grade school, but high school. Our house is between Main Street area and the old YMCA. And the kids, as teenagers, would stop at our house hoping I had made cookies or something. And they're big, and our house is not huge. They'd start roughhousing, and I would say, guys, stop it. And of course, they did not listen. Jim would come in and say, guys, stop it. And they'd stop. And I asked him once, okay, I just said that. Mr. Dart says it differently. Something that often gets talked about, and I wish I remembered exactly why I did what I did, but this was later in the spring, and Earvin was on a weekend basketball team. And I said to him, you need to straighten this out. And he did not. And I told him that I was going to talk with Mr. Lund, and Earvin was not going to play in the game, the championship game, if it didn't get straightened out. And I don't know whether he was testing me or what, but he didn't. I talked to Mr. Lund, and Mr. Lund said, okay, this time, if you say he shouldn't play, he won't play. And they lost the game, and I had a group of 5th graders who were very angry. And years later, I think Earvin has indicated that he learned some kind of lesson from that. Well, I think he felt really comfortable with us. I think that we were probably the first white couple that he was around. And Jim, of course, absolutely loved him. Of course, I did too, but I mean, Jim would take him any place that he could. And at one point, when Earvin was a sixth grader, we sent him to Paul Cook's basketball camp. Maybe. And then when he was an eighth grader, we sent him to MSU's basketball camp. Smartest thing we ever did. And he came back from that. Well, I didn't play with the junior high kids. I played with the high school kids. And I didn't get best player in camp, but I did get best passer in camp. And he was really, really proud of that. I don't know. It just took. We liked each other. Earvin had flown Jim and me to the Rose Bowl in 88, 87, I can't remember. It must have been 88 because he wouldn't have had this in 87. And we stayed with Earvin. And after the Rose Bowl game and after we had gone to dinner, we came back to Earvin's house, and there was just Earvin and Jim and me for the first time all weekend. And Earvin, we were sitting around talking, and Earvin said, "Oh, Mrs. Dart, I have something for you." And he went off to another room and came back and said, "Close your eyes." And I could feel him putting something around my neck, and when I opened up my eyes, this was it. Yeah. What I'm wearing is a gift from Earvin. It is the pendant from the Lakers championship of 1987. Somebody once said to me, "It's not so important that you know Earvin. What's important is he knows you." And the whole time, I see him on TV and I picture this little kid with a big, big smile. He was an incredibly happy kid. He was cheerful, and he touched a lot of lives.